Okay, so I will then just click on the
Okay.
button and start the webinar.
Okay.
Okay, just a second. Let's just wait a couple of seconds so that people join. Let's wait for a couple of seconds. People are joining and I will start. All right. Uh, Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The Georgian Foundation for Strategic and International Studies, Rondeli Foundation, is hosting a webinar dedicated to the recent developments in Armenian and Azerbaijani relations, mostly associated with the finalization of the text of the peace deal, which has been announced recently. This is a very interesting topic around the world, but especially in the South Caucasus region and for Georgia as well. And that's why we decided today to present a view from Armenia, how
Заслушать
Armenian experts,
взгляд
Armenian society sees these developments. And I would like to also remind our viewers that it has been the tradition of the Rondeli Foundation to balance views from different sides. And we are planning to host a similar event and present a view from Azerbaijan in the near future. So today we're going to discuss a variety of issues related to the potential peace agreement and Armenia's relations, not only with Azerbaijan, but also with Russia, with Turkey, and the regional implications of what has been going on in the bilateral relations of these countries. So one technical issue, we are providing simultaneous translation from Russian to English. And if you are willing to switch the language, there is a button at the lower panel. So if you click on the interpretation, you can choose the language which is more comfortable to you. Now I would like to present our distinguished panelists who are participating in this webinar from Yerevan, Armenia. Dr. Benjamin Bogosyan, Senior Research Fellow at the Applied Policy Research Institute, Armenia, an independent think tank, and Dr. Stepan Grigoryan, Chairman of the Board at the Analytical Center on Globalization and Regional Cooperation, also a think tank based in Yerevan. Thank you very much for your time and for participating in this webinar. Let's start by broadly discussing the latest developments in relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan. We have learned that the text of the peace agreement has been finalized, but this is one big step forward, which logically should be followed with the signing of the agreement and then, of course, the implementation of the agreement. We've seen that Azerbaijan has presented some conditions before this peace agreement could be signed. We all know that there are two basic points. So one is the Armenian Constitution. They ask for changing the preamble of the Armenian Constitution, which refers to the Declaration of Independence of Armenia, which in turn refers to Nagorno-Karabakh. And second is the dissolution of the Minsk group, which has been the main body participating and mediating the negotiations between the two countries since 1992. First, I would like you to present your view of the situation. What are the main problems? What are the main challenges? And how do you see the way ahead? Mr. Pogosyan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I would like to thank GFSIS for inviting me and also for organizing this timely webinar on Armenia-Azerbaijan relations. You mentioned about the finalization of the draft peace agreement, which was officially announced on March 13, 2025. But for our audience, have a better picture where Armenia and Azerbaijan were, where they are now, and what may happen in the near or midterm future. I would like very briefly, but to touch upon the situation which was at least in the last 1 year. So starting from spring 2024, we have this situation. Azerbaijan had 3 baskets of demands from Armenia. One basket of demands, they were related to the text of peace agreement itself, because already in 2024, the 15 articles from 17 were agreed between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And Armenia offered many times that let's sign these 15 agreed articles as a final document and then continue on other issues. But Azerbaijan was insisting that no, you should also accept my demand or my wording of these remaining 2 articles. So there was a basket number 1, demands on the text itself. There was basket number 2, preconditions or demands, what Armenia should do so that Azerbaijan sign the agreement when it will be, text will be finalized. And there was also on this basket number 3. Basket number 3 are additional Azerbaijani demands. This additional list of these additional Azerbaijani demands are quite long. It starts from the demand to establish de facto extraterritorial corridor via Armenia to connect Azerbaijan with Nakhchivan and Turkey. The second demand is the so-called concept of Western Azerbaijan, that almost 50% or even more of Armenia's territory is historically Azerbaijani lands. Then Azerbaijanis, and we hear different numbers like 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 Azerbaijanis should come to Armenia and they should have some special rights for security and etc. There were also demands that Armenia should cancel its contracts, which Armenia signed in recent years with France, India, regarding supply of weapons, and that Armenia should not only cancel the contract, but also should deliver back the weapons which already it received. There is a demand that Armenia should accept what happened in 1992 as a genocide. I mean, what happened in Khojaly in 1992, and some other demands. So 3 baskets, let's call them 3 baskets of Azerbaijani demands. So after 1 year of negotiations, and after a situation when Azerbaijan was permanently using the threat to use force to compel Armenia to accept this or that demand, almost daily statements about Azerbaijani iron fist, which is ready again to punch Armenians, as they punched Armenia in 2020 or 2023. And when there was a perception of the deadlock in negotiations, especially after October 2024, and there were concerns that Azerbaijan may use this deadlock, real or perceived deadlock in negotiations, to launch escalation as soon as early April 2025, Armenian government decided to break this perception of deadlock. And on March 13, Armenian government stated that, okay, I accepted Azerbaijani wording of 2 remaining articles of the peace agreement. So peace agreement itself is fixed. And then Armenia said, okay, text is fixed, so I am ready to move forward and sign agreement. But starting from the same day on March 13, Azerbaijani Ministry of Foreign Affairs stated that, okay, guys, there were three baskets of demands. Now one basket is out, the basket related with the text of the peace agreement. But two additional baskets are there. So basket number two, preconditions, what Armenia should do so that Azerbaijan sign and then ratify this peace agreement. As you mentioned, there are two preconditions, amendments or changes in the Armenian Constitution and other laws, and also dissolution of the OFEM's group. But also Azerbaijan uh, did not forget about basket number three, the other demands. And the key, as I mentioned, is the so-called Zangezur corridor. And also starting from March 13, or more precisely from March 16, from the Sunday, March 16, Azerbaijani Ministry of Defense issued on a daily basis probably 2-3 statements per day accusing Armenian forces to violate of ceasefire, telling that Armenians are firing against different Azerbaijani positions. These statements were refuted by EUMA, European Mission, Observer Mission along Armenia-Azerbaijan border, which are here since October 2022. These statements were refuted by Armenian Ministry of Defense. The statements were refuted by Prime Minister himself, who multiple times stated in the last 5 days that Armenia has zero intention for any escalation. Armenia wants peace. Armenia does not want escalation. Armenia is ready to sign peace agreement if Azerbaijan drops this precondition, at least from basket number two. So we have this situation that Armenian government made significant and additional concessions to overcome this deadlock in negotiations and said that, okay, I accept Azerbaijani wording on these two remaining articles. So text is finalized. Let's move forward for the signature. And by this step, Armenian government created a positive environment around negotiations, telling that no one can speak about deadlock. There is no deadlock, and even more, there is a significant progress and there is a breakthrough. And all the international partners, United States, European Union, Russia, China, and others, individual EU member states, they all welcomed this significant step, telling that, okay, we are very happy that negotiations are not in deadlock. Even more, sides were able to record a significant breakthrough, and all called Azerbaijan that it's time to really move forward and sign peace agreement and drop and forget about the existence of these two other baskets. Basket number two, preconditions on agreement itself, and basket number three, bunch of other demands. But unfortunately, by on a daily basis stating about ceasefire violations, my understanding is that Azerbaijan wants to turn this positive environment in negotiations, which emerged after finalization of the text, and again create a perception that there is a deadlock in negotiations, there are disagreements, there are shootings, there are these usual tit-for-tat accusations. You violated ceasefire. No, I don't violate ceasefire. And by recreating this environment of deadlock or this negative environment around negotiations, my understanding is that Azerbaijan wants to keep the window open for threat of use of force or actual use of force. And I'm speaking about escalations, which may happen, from my understanding, anytime after these holidays will end related with Nowruz and then holy month of Ramadan. So this is my understanding that Armenian government made additional significant steps to overlook the deadlock in negotiations, to register breakthrough, and to create a positive environment in negotiations. Unfortunately, we see actions from Azerbaijan to flip the situation, again, bring it back to the logic of deadlock, to the logic of negative environment, and thus, again, keep the window open for military escalation. And I will stop here.
Thank you very much. I was just going to ask this question later, but just to clear this particular issue up. The issue of this corridor in the south of Armenia. I have read that during the negotiations, it was removed from the agenda to become an issue of separate negotiations. So is this issue a different track of negotiations right now, or is it still tied to this general peace agreement text?
No, you are right. In summer 2024, Armenia and Azerbaijan decided to remove the issue of communications, or as Azerbaijan called it, issue of corridor from peace agreement. But it does not mean that Azerbaijan forget about this. As I mentioned, there is this additional third basket of demands which Azerbaijan have. And key demand from this third basket, which is not directly related with peace agreement, I mean, Azerbaijan is not telling, I will not sign and ratify agreement as far as there is a no Zangezur corridor. But Azerbaijan, almost on a daily basis, demands the opening of Zangezur corridor and threatens, telling that Armenia promised the opening of Zangezur corridor back in November 2020, that Azerbaijani patience is not forever, and if Armenia will not fulfill its promises, then Azerbaijan will open the corridor by any means. As President Aliyev stated in his January 7, 2025 interview to local Azerbaijani media, he said that Zangezur corridor should be opened and it will be opened. And Armenia should understand it very well. So while Azerbaijan is not directly linking the opening of the corridor to the issue of signature of peace agreement, but the demand to open the corridor is still there, and threat to use force to open the corridor is still there.
Thank you. Obviously, I have plenty of questions, but now I would like to give the floor to Dr. Grigoryan to present his evaluation of the current situation.
Да, спасибо большое за эту возможность выступить, за наше сотрудничество с вашим центром.
With the Rondeli Foundation, with your center, and my colleague, Mr. Pogosan, has presented the...
Ваше внимание на следующее. Вот когда Армения и Азербайджан, буквально несколько дней назад, Министерство иностранных дел объявили, что Армения и Азербайджан согласовали текст мирного договора, конечно, это очень хорошая новость. Мы всегда приветствуем мир, а кто не хочет мира? Очень интересная была реакция мирового сообщества. Уверен, вы сейчас думаете, что да, конечно, это поддержали европейцы, американцы, канадцы, японцы, австралийцы. Должен вам сказать, что это заявление армянского отдельно МИДа и отдельно азербайджанского МИДа, что согласован текст, приветствовал арабский мир и отдельные страны арабского мира, и Лига арабских стран, приветствовал мусульманский мир, многие страны мусульманского мира, в том числе Турция, приветствовали, в том числе, вот есть такая организация исламского сотрудничества, они приветствовали, латиноамериканские страны. Что я хочу сказать? Очень интересно, получилось так, что к этому процессу проявляет интерес не только Европа, которая непосредственно сотрудничает с странами Южного Кавказа, не только США, Канада, демократического мира страны, которые с Арменией, вы знаете, имеют очень тесные сотрудничества, контакты, не только региональные страны, как Турция, Иран, да, которые приветствовали, Грузия приветствовала, одной из первых. Оказалось, в общем, в мире достаточно серьезные отношения. Еще раз повторяю, представляете, конференция исламского сотрудничества приветствовала, да, их секретариат арабских стран, латиноамериканские страны, главные игроки типа Аргентины, Бразилии, Чили. Что я хочу сказать, что действительно есть интерес к тому, чтобы был бы мир. И это, мне кажется, должно быть важным стимулом для обоих сторон. Не надо думать, что только интерес у Армении в мире, но и для Азербайджана. В чем дело? Что тут за проблема? Но, к сожалению, сразу после этого заявления и внутри этого заявления азербайджанского МИДа там было написано: нет, вот, ребята, все хорошо, но еще 2 пункта вы, пожалуйста, выполните. Измените Конституцию Армении и откажитесь от Минской группы ОБСЕ. И здесь очень важный нюанс. Вот вы задали вопрос Бенджамину, очень важный. А вот вопрос коридоров вне этого договора или нет. Да, многие вопросы выведены за пределы договора, в том числе возможное изменение Конституции Армении и Азербайджана. Вы знаете, в азербайджанской Конституции тоже есть требования к армянским территориям. Возможный отказ от Минской группы ОБСЕ. Все это выведено за пределы. Но что очень важно, вот эти 17 пунктов, когда мы говорим, которые согласованы, в них были два очень чувствительных пункта: отзыв судебных
but also the demands include withdrawal of claims from international organizations and also withdrawal of international monitoring groups. So I will tell you openly, well, that could be a call to withdraw the monitoring teams, but is not it a call preceding potential violation of ceasefire? You can tell me, well, Stepan, we do remember that last year 4 Armenian pilots were killed, and they were killed in the area where Russian border guards actually are located. And this is the only spot where we had the victims, the casualties. So my question to the Azerbaijani colleagues, diplomats and experts is as follows. Armenia has agreed to these two very sensitive demands, sensitive points. Of course, there are a lot of other issues, other points and articles that everybody agreed to, but these two requirements to withdraw the claims from international courts were very important. And you know that we have won some of the cases in the European Court of Human Rights, in some others. But Armenia did agree to withdraw the claims, and Armenia also did agree that if Azerbaijan and Armenia signed the deal, then Armenia would no longer invite any other forces, monitoring forces or security forces on its territory. You know what? I can tell you that I have never met a person in Armenia who is against the war. Even Nicola Pashinyan is not against the war. But after all those points and articles were agreed, the Armenian authorities face a lot of criticism from the Armenian society. And I want the Azerbaijani government and the authorities to realize that Armenia did make the concessions, and that actually opened up the opportunity to work on the text of the peace deal. But you correctly mentioned that there are some issues still pending that are taken out of the peace deal, out of the peace agreement. They are beyond the peace deal now. But I think what is most important now is to sign the peace deal as it is, and then continue the negotiations, continue discussing the events, everything what has happened. And by the way, according to the recent statements of our government, they seem to be ready to discuss these issues further. But I don't think we need to underscore these issues now as a prerequisite for signing the deal. Again, we need to consider Russia. Russia today does not have any leverage to put pressure on the South Caucasus. It cannot interest or attract our countries with any interested projects. That's why it's not in their interest that Azerbaijan and Armenia would sign a peace deal. It is in their interest to keep the conflict frozen until it's unfrozen for some reason. And one more factor that might be stimulating for Azerbaijan, that's the rigid position of Turkey. They tell, Armenians, they tell us, Azerbaijani and Armenians, okay, it's your deal, go sign the deal, and then we will open the border if Azerbaijan signs the deal. But what does opening of a border means for thinking individuals? That is something that is also beneficial for Azerbaijan. Because it's actually enabling the region to breathe. It intensifies cooperation between Armenia and Turkey. It intensifies cooperation between Turkey and Georgia, etc. And well, it benefits the region. So again, why wouldn't Azerbaijan be willing to do it? Well, Azerbaijan might have some hidden interests, the interest that it shares with Russia, maybe, but frankly, I don't believe it, because I don't think that Azerbaijan does not want peace in the region. So, well, today there are no Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh. We need to realize that. So, again, today the situation is complicated, but we need to make the best use of it, the best use of what we have. And again, for instance, if we look at the West very frequently tries to draw parallels between the situation between Azerbaijan and Armenia and Russia and Ukraine, but this is a different conflict. And you know, the Nikola Pashinyan's government is quite tricky. People are ready for peace today. People are ready for concessions. And I don't think that it will be wise of the government not to make use of the situation.
Introduction. Before I return to the two main questions about the issues still being presented as obstacles to signing the peace agreement, if I correctly understood, and this is my follow-up question regarding the EU mission in Armenia. So if the peace agreement will be signed in the near future, then Armenia is ready to stop the EU mission on its border with Azerbaijan, and the EU observers would then leave the area. Is that correct?
Да, это так.
Yes, that's correct. And I can boldly tell you it's so, because that was mentioned in a statement by the Armenian Prime Minister, not by an expert or a politician or an official, but by the Prime Minister of Armenia, and he said it very clearly. So he was so clear that nobody can say now that it was vague. The statement was clear. As an expert, I do not fully agree with this position, to tell you the truth, because the EU monitoring mission is not an armed mission. It does not create any problems. But again, this is what Nikola Pashinyan stated in the parliament and at a meeting with the government. So he said that immediately after Azerbaijan signs the peace deal, Armenia will make a decision on the EU mission.
Allow me, I will return to the two conditions presented by Azerbaijan. I understand that this is a very sensitive issue, but if you could explain to the Georgian audience in a better way, and this is the question to both speakers. What is the Armenian position regarding the Minsk group? Do you consider possible to dissolve the Minsk group, but after the signing of the peace agreement? That is one question. And the second one is concerning the Armenian constitution. How can one change the constitution? As I understand, the only way to change it is a referendum. So can we say that there will be no peace agreement signed before a potential referendum in Armenia?
If I may, just briefly, and then Mr. Grigoryan will follow. So regarding the OSCE Minsk group, Armenia's official position is very clear. Yes, if there is no conflict, then there should be no international body dealing with this conflict. But the key here is if there is no conflict. So from Armenia's perception, when we can argue, definitely argue that there is no conflict, when there is an agreement signed. So here, Armenia's position is very clear. Yes, when we will have signed and ratified peace agreement, and I would like to emphasize also ratification, because you may sign agreement and then never ratify it, and it will never enter into force. So on OSCE Minsk group, when Armenia and Azerbaijan sign peace agreement, ratify peace agreement, and peace agreement enters into force, then of course, definitely Armenia believes that there will be no need for OSCE Minsk group or any international body dealing with Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict, because after entering into the force of the peace agreement, there will be no conflict. So this is what regards to OSCE Minsk group. Now about the constitution. First, Armenia's official position is that Armenia's constitution has no territorial claims towards Azerbaijan, and also Armenian Constitutional Court adopted a special decision in September 2024, telling that Armenian constitution has no territorial claims towards Azerbaijan because Constitutional Court ruled that the Declaration of Independence, which is referenced in the preamble of the Constitution, it's per se has no legal force in Armenia. So only those parts of the Declaration of Independence which are directly copy-paste into Constitution, they have the legal force. They are the part of Constitution. So reference to the Declaration of Independence does not mean that entire document is a part of Armenia's Constitution or has legal force in Armenia. This is first. Second, Armenian government believes that Azerbaijani Constitution has territorial claims towards Armenia, but the Armenian government does not want to put this as a precondition that Armenia will sign and ratify peace agreement only after Azerbaijan changed its constitution, because Armenian government believes that this is a non-productive steps and this will simply delay the signing and ratification of the peace agreement. And third, about constitutional referendum. First of all, the idea that Armenia needs a new constitution came immediately after 2015 referendum, when Armenia changed its government style from presidential or semi-presidential to parliamentary republic. Even before Velvet Revolution, there were a lot of talks that the constitution, which was approved in 2015, it gave too much authorities to prime minister. Even there was a joke that according to Armenia's constitution, prime minister is an elected king in Armenia because he has too much authorities. And this was stated also by Mr. Pashinyan, who at that time was opposition member of parliament. And also immediately after the Velvet Revolution, Pashinyan was speaking about necessity to change Armenia's constitution, but not because of some territorial claims towards Azerbaijan or because Azerbaijan wants it, but because, again, as I mentioned, immediately after the approval of the current version of constitution, there were a lot of criticism against current form of constitution. And the talks that constitution should be changed were here immediately after Velvet Revolution. Mr. Pashinyan even established a special constitutional council, but then COVID came, then 2020 Nagorno-Karabakh war came, and this constitutional council did not end its work. And then new constitutional council was established in early 2022, again to draft an amendment to the constitution. And then in 2024, Pashinyan says that he thinks that Armenia needs new constitution, not amendments, but a new constitution. And as of now, the government says that the draft of new constitution will be ready probably in early summer 2026, just before the scheduled parliamentary elections. But first, government is not telling that in this new draft of this new constitution, I will accept Azerbaijani demands. No one is telling this. This is number one. So no one can say that, yes, in this draft constitution, Armenia will accept or realize Azerbaijani demands. Second, the new constitution should be adopted by a referendum. And to be confirmed or to be approved, 25% of overall voters, not 25% of people who will take part in the vote, but 25% of overall voters registered in voting list in Armenia should vote in favor of constitution, which means approximately 650,000 votes. And if Azerbaijan will continue to say that, okay, Armenia is changing its constitution on our demands, and Armenia should change its constitution because someone sitting in Baku wants it, I have great doubts that 650,000 people will vote for this constitution. So what I want to say that yes, government wants to have a new constitution, and government plans to have a constitutional referendum somewhere in late 2026. But A, no one is telling that this new constitution will be sent previously to Azerbaijan for review and confirmation, and we will only put the referendum text reviewed and approved by Azerbaijan, A, and B, no one can be sure that population will vote for this new draft of constitution for whatever reasons. So just to say, okay, let's wait 1.5 years and then Armenia will adopt new constitution and then peace agreement will be signed, this talks or this perception or this assessment or consideration is a little bit out of logic because again, no one can be sure that the text previously will be approved or reviewed or confirmed by Azerbaijan. B, constitution or population may not vote for a constitution. The draft constitution may not receive these 650,000 votes. So if Azerbaijan tells, okay, let's wait until new constitution will be approved by a referendum and then we may discuss the signature of the peace agreement, de facto in reality it means that Azerbaijan is telling most probably I am not going to sign any peace agreement. And that is why I have a perception that these are not preconditions by Azerbaijan, all these demands. Constitution or FM's group, these are not preconditions. These are pretexts, simply to avoid signature of peace agreement. Why? Mr. Grigoryan raised some issues. Maybe they are not interested to see weakened Russia position in South Caucasus because they know very well that after peace agreement, Armenia-Turkey relations will be normalized, and definitely this is bad for Russia. Maybe they have some other issues why they don't want to sign peace agreement. Maybe they want to take Armenia again. That is why they think if peace agreement will be signed and ratified, it will be more complicated for Azerbaijan to launch new attack against Armenia. I don't know the reasons, and maybe Azerbaijan experts can explain reasons why Azerbaijan does not want to sign peace agreement with Armenia. But for me, it's more or less clear that all these talks about preconditions, there is no precondition, there are pretexts. Pretexts simply not to sign any peace agreement with Armenia.
Dr. Grigoryan, probably you want to add something?
Да, я хочу отреагировать.
Yes, I would like to respond. Regarding the constitution, the situation is in reality much simpler because my colleague has presented a very wide analysis of the situation. But in reality, it's simpler. The agreed text of the peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan includes 17 articles. And there is one very important article that reads as follows. After this document is signed and ratified by the Armenian Parliament and Mejlis of Azerbaijan, this document will have a priority over the constitutions of Armenia and Azerbaijan. So that means that if tomorrow Azerbaijan agrees to sign this deal and Armenia signs this deal and our parliaments ratify this deal, then automatically we would no longer need to change the constitutions of either Azerbaijan or Armenia. Of course, I do agree that if we agree to change the constitution, to adjust the Declaration of Independence of Armenia. By the way, I was one of the co-authors of the declaration. We prepared the declaration, we drafted it, we voted for it. And Azerbaijan today is telling us, you know, in the preamble of your constitution, you have a reference, cross-reference to this declaration, and this is rather something that we are not happy with. But Again, I repeat, signing and ratification of the peace deal between Armenia and Azerbaijan automatically has priority over the existing constitutions or any other legal acts existing in both countries. Then the second issue, the Minsk group. You know that our government says, well, they're telling Azerbaijan, first you need to sign the peace deal. And then we will agree to the dissolution of the Minsk group. I disagree with them, and I will explain why. Azerbaijan is telling us now, you know what, Armenia illegally violated our rights. And well, again, what is Minsk group? This is Azerbaijan, Armenia, and 9 more countries, including the United States, France, and Russia as co-chairs. And we have been working for 30 years. They have prepared multiple documents, and all the members of the Minsk group signed the documents. The president of Azerbaijan did, Armenian prime minister did, and representatives of the United States, Russia, and France signed a lot of documents stating that the conflict had to be resolved peacefully. So that was a lengthy and a very complicated struggle, but it was a legitimate struggle. So how can one say tomorrow, you know, all those actions were illegal and you need to be dissolved? I don't think that Armenia should sharply agree to the dissolution of the Minsk group. Or there was an alternative proposal, like, for instance, we dissolve the Minsk group and Azerbaijan actually gives up its territorial claims. That would be more logical. That would be more acceptable. So again, the Minsk group is not an OSCE format. It was a UN format. It was actually created by the initiative of the Security Council. And so again, that means that the struggle of the people of Nagorno-Karabakh, the struggle over Nagorno-Karabakh from Armenia was quite legitimate. That's why I don't agree to give up the Minsk group so easily, though I can see that the prime minister, the government is ready to give it up now.
Another question is related to the stalemate which you described in negotiations on the signing of the peace agreement. And whenever there is a stalemate between the parties, there usually should be a mediator who helps the parties find the common language and maybe arrive at a compromise. In the case with Armenia and Azerbaijan, whom do you consider to be a mediator? The EU, Russia, the US, or maybe somebody else?
Well, thank you for your question. That's a very good question. Until 2020, or until the start of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the mediation work, it was done by OSCE and Minsk group, by these 3 co-chairs, mostly Russia, France, United States. Then there was a Brussels platform. So the mediator was the European Union, and former president of the European Council, Charles Michel, organized up to 6 meetings between Prime Minister Pashinyan and President Aliyev in Brussels in 2022 and 2023. And then there was also these US mediation efforts, because Americans organized again 2 meetings between foreign ministers in 2023, and then 2 or 3 meetings between foreign ministers in 2024. They also organized meeting between Prime Minister Pashinyan and President Aliyev in Munich Security Conference in 2023. So we may say that in 3 years, 2022, 2023, and 2024, there were 2 main platforms of mediation, or 2 main mediators, the European Union and the United States. but both mediation platforms were destroyed by Azerbaijan. First, Azerbaijan destroyed the Brussels platform when President Aliyev did not go to Granada Summit of European Political Community in October 2023, and then simply refuted any discussions on the Brussels format. And then in late 2024, Azerbaijan also dismissed the US platform, accusing the Biden administration of being pro-Armenian. So on the Azerbaijani demand, and Azerbaijan put this demand on Armenia that I am not going to negotiate with any mediators, so Armenia should choose either no negotiations or bilateral negotiations. And despite Armenia understood that bilateral negotiations mean no guarantors, no guarantees, in a situation when military balance of power still is in favor of Azerbaijan, and when Azerbaijan uses the threat of force almost on a daily basis, Armenia understood that this is dangerous. But when there was a choice, either no negotiations or bilateral negotiation without mediators, Armenia chose the second option, negotiations without mediators. So the fact that currently there are no mediators between Armenia and Azerbaijan, this is because of Azerbaijani position, which first killed Brussels platform and then in 2024 killed Washington platform. And my understanding is that Azerbaijan still does not want to hear anything about mediators or anything about guarantors, while Armenian position was very clear. Many times Armenia reiterated, I am ready to come back to Brussels platform. I am ready to come back to Washington platform, at least until recent presidential elections. But Azerbaijani position was very clear, either no negotiations or negotiations only on bilateral level. And as far as Azerbaijan continues to pursue this policy, no negotiations or bilateral negotiations, I believe Armenia, despite telling that I'm interested to have mediators, Armenia will say, okay, if the alternative of mediators is absence of negotiations, then better have negotiations.
In 2020, Russia was presented as a mediator of the ceasefire agreement. As I understand, that may not be the case right now.
Yes, Russia mediated this November 2020 ceasefire statement, not agreement statement, and there were also additionally three statements signed by Armenian, Azerbaijani, and Russian leaders, one in January 2021, then in November 2021, and the last statement was signed in October 2022. But after the start of the Russia's invasion of Ukraine, like Russia was focused or put all its focus on resources into Ukraine, and then EU and the United States launched their mediation efforts. So theoretically, and Russia is always stating that I'm ready to restart my negotiation effort. Even just a few days ago, when Russian Foreign Ministry welcomed the agreement to finalize the draft text of peace agreement, again, Russia stated that I'm ready to recreate Russia's platform. I am ready to send my special representative on Armenia-Azerbaijan issues to Baku and Yerevan. That Moscow is ready to provide a platform even for the signature of peace agreement if sides are close to signature. So, but as of now, my understanding is Azerbaijan does not want any mediators, and Armenia's position is that after Russia failed fully or at least partly to realize its security guarantees toward Armenia, I'm not speaking about towards Nagorno-Karabakh because there were no Russia's or CSTO security guarantees towards Nagorno-Karabakh, but Azerbaijan attacked Armenia 3 times, 2 times in 2021 and 1 time in September 2022. So after Russia failed to fully realize its security obligations derived from Armenia-Russia agreement on friendship and mutual defense, and also Armenia's membership into CSTO, my understanding is that Armenian government also was not interested in Russia's mediation. But while Armenia's government was not interested in Russia's mediation, Azerbaijan was not interested in any mediation.
Thank you. Dr. Grigoryan, what is your view on the possibility of mediation at this point?
Well, I just would like to draw your attention to the fact that partially the bilateral scheme of relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan did work. There was a delineation, demarcation effort on several sections in the north of Armenia, several sections of the border, and it was quite successful, though painful. I can tell you more. Armenia and Azerbaijan signed an agreement on delimitation of that segment of the border, a protocol. Ilham Aliyev approved of that agreement, and also Prime Minister of Armenia approved of it. That means that bilateral mechanism does work. So what is left now is just to agree on some technical details. So to some point, it does work. As for mediators, I can see three actors that might be useful: Turkey, EU, and US. So under Trump, the policy of the United States somewhat changed, but I would not say that it changed with regard to Armenia. Like, for instance, if we look at what Watts was saying, who is a security advisor to Trump, he said, "We are interested in peace and we call for Azerbaijan to sign the peace deal and to release the war prisoners who are now being tried in Baku." So that was a message from the United States, and I think it was well heard by Azerbaijan. Now about the EU. Why is EU involvement is very important? Because Turkey wants to have a defense pact signed with EU. Second, Turkey is about to renew its customs union with the EU. So it's a very good moment now. And the EU is telling them, you know, you need to open your border with Armenia. We want you to be more active in the South Caucasus because we want you to be stronger in the South Caucasus than Russia. So it's a tricky and interesting situation between Turkey and the EU. And actually, Turkey also wants the situation to change in a positive way. And Turkey no longer states its demands to Armenia. The only demand is, well, sign the peace agreement. Once it's signed, we are opening the border the next day. Again, maybe because of Donald Trump's policies, it's now in the interest of Turkey to pursue such a policy here, because Turkey is a bigger actor, Armenia is a smaller actor. Also, it is very important to advocate for the peace policy, to repeat that we want peace. For instance, I have some comments on Azerbaijani's demands or policy, but I really welcome Armenian government in willing to sign this agreement. And we need to view the situation globally, not only in the Azerbaijani-Armenian context, but in the context of the South Caucasus in general. For instance, the Zangezur corridor. If Armenia agrees to open the corridor and open the corridor under the sovereignty of Armenia, then this road, this Zangezur road, or the Sunni corridor, as we call it, would be the shortest way from Azerbaijan to Turkey and on to Central Asia, to Iran, and some other countries. It opens up a lot of perspectives at once. So that's why, in my opinion, we do need mediators, and that's a normal practice. Of course, Armenia and Azerbaijan somehow manage to negotiate without mediators, but we do need some external actors or actors to be involved into this process. And when a lot of people are involved in a peaceful process, then there is no time for shooting.
So obviously, the big issue is Russia. Relations between Russia and Armenia are very interesting for the Georgian audience and for many international observers. I would like you to talk briefly about how you see Russian actions, Russian role in relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan. You partly touched upon this issue, but maybe you could give us some more details. What is the current status of relations between Russia and Armenia, especially after Armenia froze its participation in the CSTO and announced its willingness to integrate with the European Union? How do these processes develop, and how are they linked with the possibility of a peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan?
Thank you. I will separate Armenia-Russia relations into three main areas or three main tracks. First is military technical cooperation, second, political cooperation, third, economic cooperation. On military technical cooperation, relations reached almost zero. If before 2018, more than 90% of military technical cooperation of Armenia was with Russia, including supply of weapons, as of late 2024, Russia's share in Armenia's military technical cooperation is below 5%. So it's somewhere between 0 and 5. And key Armenian partners, they are India and France. And if you just go to the internet, to the publicly available information, you may see that Armenia signed up to $1.5 billion of contracts with India and approximately 250 million euros of contracts with France. So military technical cooperation, it's dropped from 95% to almost 0%. Political cooperation also is complicated. A lot of accusations against each other. Russia accused Armenia of trying to replicate Ukraine, to become next Ukraine, that Armenia supported West to push Russia out of the South Caucasus, and Armenia accused of Russia of not realizing its security obligations under this bilateral treaty of 1997 and also under the multilateral framework of CSTO when Azerbaijan attacked Armenia in 2021, 2022. So political relations are very complicated, but still there are some relations. For example, Prime Minister Pashinyan visits Moscow in 2024. He was there, I think, for several times, at least in Russia. In October 2024 for BRICS summit, in December 2024 for Eurasian Economic Union summit, and etc. So military technical cooperation almost zero. Political cooperation complicated but still exists. And economic cooperation is going up. Bilateral trade is going up. Just two numbers, and I will stop there. In 2021, Russia-Armenia bilateral trade was $2.5 billion US. $2.5 billion US, 2021. In 2024, in last year, Armenia-Russia bilateral trade reached $12.5 billion. $12.5 billion. So in economy, at least in trade, we see significant boom. So there is no one concept of Armenia-Russia relations. Again, military technical component reached almost zero, political component went down, economic component went up. Regarding Russia's future position in South Caucasus, I think much depends on outcome of war in Ukraine and also on broader US-Russia talks and negotiations, which we see currently underway, like President Trump speaks with President Putin. I don't know, high-level officials met and will meet in Saudi Arabia. So if war in Ukraine stops and there is some sort of ceasefire, and there is also broader understanding between US and Russia, my understanding is that Russian influence in South Caucasus will go up. what impact it will have on Armenia, on Azerbaijan, on Georgia, on Armenia-Azerbaijan relations, it's early and too challenging to assess. But again, if there will be ceasefire in Ukraine in 2025 and some sort of broader understanding between US and Russia in 2025, I may assume that starting from 2026, we will see more Russia in South Caucasus.
Thank you. Dr. Grigoryan?
Да. Ну, я
Well,
должен сказать следующую вещь, что
I
политика России
want to say that Russia's policy today is apparently anti-Armenian. You know that the security treaty and Russia do not want to admit that Azerbaijan has invaded into Armenia. If Russia is our formal ally, if we are members of this alliance, of this security treatment, at least they should have made some statement over that. But they are telling us, you know, this is a cross-border problem. You know, that's your cross-border problem. But you know what? A cross-border problem is like moving the border 20 or 50 meters, but not 60 kilometers. So Russia is not for us. It is against us. And that's why Nikol Pashinyan had to freeze the participation of Armenia in the collective security treaty. And actually, the security treaty consortium or alliance changed totally, and that's why Pashinyan had to freeze our membership there, because actually it seemed that we were members of an alliance that did not recognize our sovereignty and integrity. And fortunately, our government is now trying to diversify its relations and partnerships economically, in the military sphere, etc. And it's good that Russia's share in our military is now minimized. But you know, when we speak about Russia and Russia's interest, we should not never think that Russia has some focused interest only in one region. I think that it is in Russia's interest to deprive the countries of Southern Caucasus of their sovereignty, of their independence. So the question is how Russia might do it. Russia might use the same option that it has used in Ukraine or some other options. You know, I would recommend that you very attentively read the statements made by Shoigu. Like, for instance, one Shoigu said that, you know, Armenia should help Russia by providing some military assistance. So I think, and he made a statement that Armenia allegedly wanted to join some anti-Russia sanctions. I think he made that statement because he needed, you know, some reason to potentially further make some steps against Armenia. And again, I repeat that Russia's interest is to deprive our countries of our sovereignty and to control, to regain control over South Caucasus. Like, for instance, Russia says that in one agreement dated 2009 includes one article that says that Russian forces should be present in the Zangezur corridor. My response is What about all the other articles? Why haven't you fulfilled all the other requirements and you are focusing now only on this specific point? Again, Russia is a very complicated actor. Maybe economically Russia's role would be increasing, but you know what? Today, for instance, we know that in the Georgian political elite, in the Azerbaijani political elite, there have always been critical voices, criticism against Russia's influence. But the Armenian political elite and even the political elite in Nagorno-Karabakh historically was pro-Russian. But you know what? If you try to say something pro-Russian in Armenia today, you will face some problems because Armenians are very deeply insulted. They feel insulted by Russia because Russia did not protect Armenia. On the contrary, they are threatening us every day. That's why our partners now are the EU, the United States, and Turkey. And our government is trying to reach out to these partners, and we are very much supportive of this government, not because it is perfect, but because they have realized this major idea, the idea that they need to work with Turkey, need to try to agree with Azerbaijan, need to cooperate with the United States. And by the way, current Armenian government is strengthening their relations with the Georgian government very strongly, and
Thank
we
you.
welcome
Just to
welcome it.
close this topic with a follow-up question. So you believe that Russia is not interested in a peace deal between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and hence can we conclude that at the moment Russia is not pressuring Armenia to fulfill the conditions presented by Azerbaijan?
Look, first of all, let's fix that the key reason why there is no peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan is the position of Azerbaijan. It's not position of Russia, China, Iran, I don't know, United States, President Trump, or whatever. There is a clear position of Azerbaijan, which is doing everything not to sign any peace agreement with Armenia. And by the way, by doing so, he also prevent Armenia-Turkey normalization and prevents the geopolitical shift in the South Caucasus. Regarding Russian position, frankly speaking, my understanding is that especially now, when they are in different talk with United States, I don't think that they really seriously think about South Caucasus, what will happen there or not will happen there. From my perspective, Russian vision is at the strategic level. If we are able to somehow come to understanding with the United States on big issues, and big issues, I mean Ukraine, I mean entire European security architecture, South Caucasus is a tiny part of this European security architecture. So from Russian perspective, if there will be broader understanding between US, Russia, and potentially at least with part of European countries about broader European security architecture, then the issue of South Caucasus is not a big deal for Russia. So I'm not sure that they are even like now focused on South Caucasus because now they are focused on negotiations with the United States because finally, from their perspective, after many years of US ignorance, now there is a president in the United States who are telling that Russia is a great power. Everybody should respect Russia. It's impossible to defeat Russia, and the US will only benefit with friendly relation with Russia. After hearing all this from President of the United States, definitely Russia will focus on its negotiation with United States and not on what's happening in the tiny spot on the globe, which we call here South Caucasus.
Thank you. Dr. Grigorian, do you want to add something?
Да, я коротко очень.
Yes, I will be very brief. You know, I disagree with this idea that Aliyev is the major obstacle for signing the peace agreement. Aliyev wants to get the best result. Well, that's understandable. He is a politician. He is a leader of the country. He wants to have as much as he can. He has good relations with Pakistan, Israel, Turkey. He has managed to diversify the Turkish economy, Turkish energy sector, Turkish military and defense sector, and Armenia is just now trying to do so. Of course, Aliyev does understand that further on Armenia might become stronger and it will be more difficult to demand something from Armenia after the relations with Turkey are normalized. That's why he's trying to demand as much as he can now. And by the way, you remember that Aliyev agreed on demarcation and delineation of the border in the frames of the previous Almaty agreement. So he acted quite logically there. So don't pay attention to the rhetorics, but to what the politicians are doing. Because now, for instance, rhetorically, Trump is crossing all the boundaries or the red lines. Aliyev is very reasonable. Even when he makes emotional statements, there is some logic, there is a deep reason behind his emotional statements. Again, Azerbaijan has this commitment to arrange the opening of the Zangezur corridor in a way that Russia would have some influence over it. And they are listening to Russia, they are thinking about this, but I don't think they are against the peace agreement. In Armenia, I would say the governance is democratic with all its faults and gaps, but it is democratic, and this is something that Putin dislikes. I think so. And that's why we need to cooperate with the United States and with the European Union more and more, and we will do our best to improve contacts with Turkey.
More questions, but since we are running out of time and we have a technical possibility to receive questions from the audience, and we already have some, I would like to read out some of the questions that are incoming. Unfortunately, I cannot read all of them, but at least a few. So there is a question, and I will read it the way it has been put. How realistic is the scenario where Armenia and Azerbaijan sign a peace treaty, but the practical implementation of the treaty will be frozen because Azerbaijan will raise the issue of unblocking transport communications, which had previously been removed from the agenda of the peace treaty?
So very briefly, as I said, currently Azerbaijan has no intention to sign peace agreement, but there is a possibility that Azerbaijan may sign but not ratify peace agreement, because we should understand that there is a big difference between signature and ratification. Just for example, in 2009, Armenia and Turkey signed protocols, restoration of diplomatic relations, opening of border. But then Turkey did not ratify, and now everyone forget about 2009 protocol. So how realistic is so? I would say that it's quite realistic that Azerbaijan will not sign peace agreement. Again, telling that, oh, I will wait until you change your constitution somewhere in late 2026. Option number one. Option number two, Azerbaijan may sign peace agreement, but Azerbaijan may say, I will not ratify it until Armenia is not changing its constitution. Again, let's wait for 1.5 years until late 2026. So as of now, I see these two scenarios are more realistic. Either no signature peace agreement by Azerbaijan, or signature but not ratification, and using these preconditions, telling that, okay, I will ratify and agreement will enter into force only if Armenia will realize this or that precondition.
Thank you.
Вы знаете, я не буду перечислять Я не буду перечислять все
You know,
отрицательные
I'm not going
варианты
to list
развития,
all these
потому что все
negative
понимают,
scenarios because I think we all
нестабильная
understand
ситуация,
that the
ты можешь
situation is
подписать и не выполнить.
very
Более того, я не
unstable. Of
исключаю
course, they can sign and
возможности
not
даже
ratify or
сожалений,
not
не исключаю, что
fulfill
может быть военная
the
эскалация,
agreement,
все
and
может быть.
even
Но
military
все
escalation
равно
might
было бы
take
хорошо,
place.
чтобы подписали.
It cannot be
После
ruled out.
подписания мы
But
будем о
anyway,
следующих
I
сценариях
think it would be
говорить. То
good
есть
to
давайте
at
идти по
least
шагам.
sign
Сценариев
the deal
много,
first
многие
and then
отрицательные
discuss all the other
варианты.
steps.
Я не
Of
скажу
course, there
все
could be
варианты.
different
То есть просто
scenarios,
для
some
поразмыслить.
negative, some positive
Давайте
ones,
стимулировать
but
диалог.
I am
Подписал через
for
международное сотрудничество. Все
motivating
будут
and
позитивные от Евросоюза.
advocating
Я
for
прошу
Aliyev
только
to
сотрудничество с
sign
Азербайджаном.
this
Вы знаете,
deal
да,
first.
оказать возможность Евросоюза, если Азербайджан
And
подпишет,
it would be
стимулировать, а
good,
после
for
Азербайджана
instance, if the
потом следующий
European
шаг
Union
попытаемся
could
выполнить.
somehow advocate for Aliyev
Thank you.
to
There
sign
is
this agreement.
another question which I find interesting regarding Azerbaijan's interests of normalizing towards normalization of relations between Armenia and Turkey. So, do you think that Azerbaijan is interested in the normalization of relations between Armenia and Turkey, or not?
I think I would just refer to the facts because, as we mentioned several times, President Erdogan's position is very clear. Armenia-Turkey relations will be normalized, including establishment of diplomatic relations and opening of the border the next day after Armenia and Azerbaijan signs peace agreement. So if President Aliyev is interested in Armenia-Turkey normalization, President Aliyev does not need to do some heroic acts or something very big or something very tremendous. He only needs to sign and ratify the agreement which texts have been agreed. And this is a very simple step to significantly contribute or actually to bring Armenia-Turkey normalization.
Thank you.
Вы знаете, многое
Well,
зависит от того,
a lot
для президента
depends
Эрдогана сегодня
on whether
сближение
President
с Евросоюзом,
Erdogan
вхождение вот эту концепцию
sees
новой безопасности,
approximation with the EU, acceptance of the new European security concept, and renewal of the customs union with Europe is something more important than relations or the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. If so, then Erdogan will try to put pressure on Aliyev to sign this agreement. Of course, Aliyev might tell him, you know, there are still some issues pending, we need to have some issues resolved. Then Erdogan would tell him, okay, I will wait. But today, it's very important for Turkey to get an approximation with the EU. And we all know that, for instance, Europe is telling Turkey, you know, you need to open your borders with Armenia, you need to restore diplomatic relations, we are watching you closely. And again, if Erdogan's interest is with the European Union, then I think that would overweigh the relations or the attitude towards the deal.
Question. I'll just read it very briefly. How sensitive are the judicial proceedings that go on in Baku right now? And what needs to happen for Azerbaijan to make a similar step of goodwill and release the trialed persons? So apparently this refers to the trial against Vardanyan and other people arrested together with him.
Of course, very briefly, definitely they are very sensitive. And we also discuss here about the necessity for additional confidence building or trust building every day when average Armenian citizens see the former leaders of self-proclaimed Nagorno-Karabakh Republic behind the bars in Azerbaijani prisons, and with some apparent views of, let's say, mistreatment, and also we see the hunger strikes stated by them. Definitely, these are not contributing to the confidence building and trust building. I would say completely opposite. They are destroying any trust or confidence which maybe was between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So definitely these issues are very sensitive. Of course, Armenia's position is, and the government position is, that what's happening in Azerbaijan is unacceptable. But also we understand that this is a significant domestic political tool for President Aliyev to depict itself as a victorious leader who bring enemies into the court, and etc., etc. So this is sensitive. This is not helpful. But frankly speaking, my understanding is that at least these trials will go until there will be sentences, most probably life sentences for these people, and then after sentencing them, maybe, but it will depend on the geopolitical situation when it may happen. President Aliyev may think about pardoning them or whatever.
Thank you. Do you want to answer, Dr. Grigoryan?
Ну, я очень коротко хочу отреагировать.
Well, very briefly. Of course, humanitarian issues are of utmost importance. If Aliyev releases all these people who are currently kept in prisons in Azerbaijan, and we know that some trials have already started, so, and of course that does not
выиграет в международных глазах. Потому что я хочу обратить внимание, не надо забывать на резолюции, принятые Европарламентом. Вы знаете, Европарламентом, когда принимаются украинские резолюции, приблизительно 400 депутатов за голосуют, это считается выдающимся результатом. Теперь вам скажу настоящий выдающийся результат. 520 депутатов Европарламента, то есть практически все депутаты, которые там есть и которые были в зале, проголосовали за освобождение этих людей. Парламентская ассамблея Совета Европы то же самое приняла. Конгресс, отдельные парламенты разных стран. Мысль моя в чем? То есть это, что нужно Азербайджану, чтобы вот это вопрос, связанный с их правами этих людей, так много муссировался. Я думаю, гуманитарные вопросы очень важны для построения доверия. Было бы хорошо, если бы он их просто Алиев отпустил.
Thank you very much. So as we are reaching the end of our interesting discussion, I just would like to give you the possibility for your final interventions and maybe put this broad questions. What do you think are
Чительными замечаниями. Как вы считаете, сегодня для Армении каковы самые серьезные внешние и внутренние вызовы? Ой, вы прямо очень широкий вопрос под конец задали, а за 2 минуты на него ответить невозможно. Что касается внешних вызовов, я думаю, это нормализация взаимоотношений между Арменией и Азербайджаном и Арменией и Турцией. Также нужно следить за тем, какой политический курс возьмет президент Трамп, и также взаимоотношения с Россией. Понятно, что мы никогда не сможем вернуться к взаимоотношениям, которые были до 2017 года, но какой-то модус операнди нам нужно найти и в отношении России. И я могу сказать, что Армения, ну, наверное, она демократическая или, скажем так, полудемократическая страна, то есть, может быть, мы не Швейцария, но мы далеки от диктатур, так, то есть мы где-то посередке. И я очень надеюсь, что вот в этом мы укрепимся и произойдет налаживание и нормализация этих взаимоотношений.
Доктор Григорян.
Доктор Григорян.
Я считаю, что, конечно, внешних угроз очень много. Мы столько говорили, что не имеет смысла сейчас повторять, откуда идут внешние угрозы. Они разные, многообразные. Смотрите, как быстро мир меняется. 2 страны, которые были как братья, как родные. Я не говорю сейчас о России и Украине. О 2 странах на американском континенте. Да? И одна большая страна сейчас применяет торговую войну против другой. То есть мир быстро меняется, и ближайшие две нации, два народа, две страны, союзники и по НАТО и так далее, но мы видим, вот сейчас идет торговая война. То есть все меняется. Поэтому...
So look how fast everything is changing, and sometimes it is even difficult to monitor and track down all these challenges. You need just to move on to develop. I think that for Armenia, the major challenges are internal ones. Of course, we have a lot of freedoms, but sometimes people are confusing freedoms with security. So, for instance, we have some political forces today that are fulfilling some orders from outside the country, and they are telling us, you know, you don't need to have a sovereignty, for instance. Of course, this is related to state security. So we need to learn to differentiate between democracy and pluralism from security, and to use the security approaches where it is needed. After that, we will indeed become a democratic country. And now we are a country in transit towards democracy, but still towards democracy, which is positive.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the Rondeli Foundation, I would like to thank our distinguished speakers, Dr. Benjamin Pogosyan and Dr. Stepan Grigoryan, for presenting their views and opinions. This, I believe, was a very interesting discussion for me personally, for the Georgian audience, and for the international viewers that were participating, as I can see in our webinar. So once again, thank you very much. We'll be returning with some more webinars in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.